Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. This is episode 6 of the Vancouver College Alumni webinar/podcast series. You can find the past episodes that we've done on YouTube or now they're on Spotify. My name is Steve Jagger. I graduated from Vancouver College in 1996, and I'm the co-president of the Alumni Association along with Mark Reed. The VC Alumni Association is a member-driven organization aimed at bringing all alumni together. We run the annual golf tournament, the Christmas lunch, the hockey game, fishing derby, basketball game, so much more. But as many of you know, with the COVID-19 situation, all of our normal activities are canceled for 2020. So we decided we'd set up this webinar series, and thus far has been quite well received. And the idea is to interview interesting alumni from across a whole bunch of different years and learn about what they're up to and how they got into their current roles in life. So a couple housekeeping items before we get started. Just wanted to note, for those that don't know, the Vancouver College Alumni Corridor is basically the hallway in the new building, which we would all, if you're a certain age, like most of us, you would call that the old building, is now gone. They've got the new building there, and they're selling bricks for the alumni for $2,500 that are 100% tax deductible. You get your name and grad year on the brick. They're trying to sell 400 of them to basically raise $1 million to save the facade, which has already been done, and they're very close to the 400 number. If you're interested in learning more, head over to VCalumni.com. We have 2 webinars upcoming. Next week, we have July 22nd, we have Kevin Falcon joining us. He's the current Executive Vice President of Anthem Capital, and he was formerly the Minister of Finance for the BC government. And then after that, on July 29th, we have the brothers Prabjeet and Ricky Ball from Lotus Terminals joining us to talk about trucking and logistics and how that whole world works. Finally, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or on the Facebook chat, and I can have Keiron answer them for you. So with that said, let me introduce our guest. So Keiron McConnell graduated from VC in 1986. He is a Vancouver Police Officer. He holds a Bachelor of General Studies degree from the Open University of British Columbia, a Master of Science degree in Policing and Public Order Studies from the University of Leicester, a Diploma in Police Leadership from Dalhousie University, a certificate in Public Sector Leadership from Royal Saudi University, and a PhD in Criminology with a focus on gangs in BC. Keiron has also worked for several other agencies in providing consulting services. These have included the Royal Saudi Arabian Police, People's Republic of China Police, the British Superintendents Association, the British Columbia Sheriffs, the British Columbia Conservation Officers, and Simon Fraser University. So thank you, Keiron, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't we start at the beginning here? Can you maybe jump into a bit of your Vancouver College world? What age or what grade did you show up at Vancouver College? How did you end up there?
Yeah, so I was one of the grade 8 boys. I came in grade 8 from Richmond, where I went to General Currie Elementary. And in grade 7, I had a very good attempt to get myself expelled. And so my parents felt that it was probably appropriate to send me to a school where I would be scared of the teachers. So that's why I ended up at Vancouver College.
Nice. Grade 8. And what was your fondest memory at the school, or best teacher or anything like that?
I had so many good teachers. I think Vancouver College is a great place. And I think that so many of them had such influence, but I'm thinking sort of Brian Davenport, Brother Call, Mr. Burke. They certainly left a lifelong impression for sure.
Gotcha. And then
Mr. Kavalak.
Yeah, Kavalak. How about sports? Did you play some sports at VC?
Yeah, I played on both the junior varsity basketball and then the varsity basketball team. I was actually quite an aspiring player, but there was a player on the team named Mark Bragnola that he just didn't pass the ball to me that frequently. So.
I'm sure Bragnola will be here shortly.
He's already on. I saw him eating his dinner.
All right.
He's eating his dinner, and Mark Reed's got no shirt on, so this is great. Great start.
Oh, good time. Yeah, I don't know if I shared some of these questions in advance with you, and I don't know if you noticed this one, but Mark wanted me to ask, what was your nickname at Vancouver College?
Anaconda.
Okay, that's not what he told me. So after Vancouver College, where did you go?
So I always wanted to be a cop. Basically, my whole life, my parents reported that I always wanted to be a police officer. So um, I graduated from college in '86, and I was I went to Langara. I did their criminal justice program, their 2-year criminal justice program, and I was a reserve officer with VPD by 1988, and I was hired in January of 1990 with Vancouver Police. And I should say, just for sake of keeping myself out of trouble, though I did hit my retirement age in back in last November, so I could retire any day. Um, what I'm going to talk about tonight is they're the viewpoints of Keiron McConnell and not necessarily the viewpoints of the Vancouver Police Department. So I know
God, I
you've
should
got a
have.
couple of questions. I know you have a couple of questions that you're going to throw at me that I'm going to try to stick handle and not get fired.
Yeah, I should have read some sort of disclaimer at the beginning. This is not the opinion of the VPD.
No.
All right, so you went to Langara. You got into the job at the VPD. What was the first role of the VPD, or how does that even start? What do you start as a police
Yeah,
officer?
I mean, it's kind of cool to be frank. I started in January 1990, and my first assignment out of the academy was District 3, which in Vancouver is the southeast sector of the city. And I was working in a patrol car with a partner for a few months, and then I ended up working in a car with a guy I went through the academy with. So we had 2 rookies running around the district with their hair on fire, just taking calls. And at the time, Southeast Vancouver District 3 was one of the busiest districts. And then I recently returned as a patrol sergeant to District 3 in November of 2019. So I've kind of came full circle in my career. That's where I started in patrol, and that's probably where I'm going to end in patrol.
Gotcha. And so, can you maybe talk us through how many years you've been VPD? Is it 22?
31.
31. Geez. Can you kind of talk us through how do the different roles work, and how long are you in each role, and what does it mean from patrol to like what was next, what was after that? I know you ended up with a gang squad for a while.
Yeah, so I worked gangs pretty much for the last 15 years up until November of 2019, where VPD has a policy. It's called tenure, and then essentially every job within the police outside of patrol has a limitation on how long you can stay. So I gangs is 5 years, but I worked in a series of different gang units. So I worked in I was originally on the firearms interdiction team, and that was back in the day when we were having a lot of homicides and shootings and violence in around the nightclubs in downtown Vancouver. This is sort of the beginning of the anti-gang patron ejection programs, such as Bar Watch and Restaurant Watch and special agreements. And then from there, I went to the violence suppression team, and that was right after the murders that occurred out in Surrey, the Surrey 6 murders. And then Vancouver had a very high profile murder at 70th and Granville, where 2 young men were sitting at a light, and they came up and they shot them in the car. But there was a Vancouver police car with 2 officers in it parked. Well, they were on a traffic stop with the lights on about a block away, and so that was the one that kind of threw our chief out of the canoe and said, "Hey, we need to do this." So overnight, I was transferred to the violence suppression team. From there, I went to the Integrated Gang Task Force, which is the provincial gang team, and then Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit, Uniform Gang Enforcement, which meant I went all over the province working gangs. And then I get the phone call basically that says, "Hey, it's time to come home." And I went back to VPD, and I worked their gang unit, and that's where I worked up until November of 2019. But I've worked all over the department. I've worked every district except District 4, which is actually where Vancouver College is. I was slated to go there at one point in my career, and I begged and pleaded and pulled in some favors not to go over there, because it's kind of the wealthier part of town that there wasn't a lot of crime in. So I've always wanted to work in busy areas. So other areas that I've worked in is I walked foot patrol in the downtown east side. I walked foot patrol on Granville Street. I taught at the academy for 3 years. but I've worked patrol in District 1, District 2, and District 3.
Gotcha. And so can you maybe, before we get into the gang or more of the gang piece, how does it work when you're in these integrated units? Do you leave the VPD and you're on somebody else's payroll or provincial payroll? Like, how does that actually function?
That's exactly how it works. You're seconded, and the VPD sends the provincial police, which in the province of British Columbia is the RCMP. They send basically a bill for your salary, and so the city of Vancouver is recouping their costs. So Vancouver is very active in secondments because it's an opportunity for officers to go and do other things that they may not necessarily have that opportunity to do with Vancouver, and then to bring those skill sets back to Vancouver. So I think at any time VPD's got about, I don't know, I should know this, but I think we have about 1,200 officers. And at any time we'll have probably 75 of them out on a variety of different secondments.
Gotcha. And so you mentioned you were on the foot patrol in the downtown east side. Like, can you, I think most of us don't know what that's like. If you could kind of lay it out there, what is that actually like? Is it unsafe? Does it feel unsafe? Is it not that unsafe? I know you're a big guy, but like, how does it all work?
So it's changed. I mean, it really has changed. But when I worked there, I didn't feel unsafe, and most of the colleagues that I worked with didn't feel unsafe. I mean, there's somewhat of a public perception of the community that is presented by media and certain groups to promote certain agendas, but the day-to-day policing down there is it's sad. Like, there you see a lot of sad, crazy things, but it's also a place where you can really help people. And if you had the chance to talk to a lot of people who through mental illness or through poverty or through drug addiction, who live in those single room occupancies, they'll be the first ones to say, at least when I work down there, that it's the police that keeps the chaos away from everybody. So I was down there at the height of the Project Seinfelds. So those of you who watched the TV show Project Seinfeld, it was a kind of a crazy idea that was brought up by a constable who said, hey, what if we just put officers on the street and basically told them to do nothing, just be there and engage and react to only serious violent crime. And what we found very quickly was it was actually a fairly effective tactic, and we drove a lot of things out of the downtown east side into other areas of the city and also other cities. So, I mean, are there days there that's a pretty hairy place to work? For sure there is. And today it's considerably worse than it was when I was there. There's more violence against the police. Violence against the police is now much more acceptable than it was back then. Back then, if you touched a cop, you were going to get arrested, and you were probably going to understand that was behavior that you should not engage in. Police are a lot more reticent now to use force for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. The new guys are a lot more. I mean, we policed like it was a hockey game, and now the young guys and gals are much more worried about the perception of it.
Gotcha. And so how does it work if like do you do a certain term down in the downtown east side as well? It's the same sort of thing as Gang Squad or anything else. You do a certain number
you can
of years?
stay there. You can stay there. I mean, we have guys. There's a few guys, the Toby Hintons of the world, the Mark Steinkamps, the Dave Steverdings, that they stayed down there for 20 years, right? There's a lot of guys there's some guys that you take them and you take them out of the downtown east side where they policed for 5-10 years, and you put them over in District 4 in Shaughnessy, and they're going crazy, right? Because they're used to the intensity of the downtown east side. I mean, the thing is, with people, it's hard to understand, but in the downtown east side, I mean, you're walking down the street, you come around the corner, and you walk into a stabbing or a shooting. Or I walked around the corner one day and a guy lit another guy on fire, right? Just walked up with lighter fluid and lit him up, right? And you just go, Like, what do you do, right? Call a
Yeah.
fire department, right? Like, so it's it's an intense place to work for sure. But people, most people who get into this job, they want the excitement of that kind of existence.
Gotcha. And so maybe can we switching over to the gang squad side? How did you go from, I guess, normal? I don't know what normal policing is, but how did you get into the gang squad? Do you choose that? Are you recruited into it? How does that
Yeah, I mean,
process happen?
I think that I think like a lot of us that are on this call tonight that went to Vancouver College, that I mean, the for all the fun and jokes that we have about the college, I mean, I think college really taught us about what it's like to be uh, a good man, and we have always opposed bullying, and gang members are bullies. It's just that simple, right? They're simply bullies. And so after a period of time, I was interested in that, and I was also interested when I was a young cop, very young cop. I was like rookie. I was involved in a high speed pursuit with in the end we determined that it was a gang member, and the my field trainer, it's the middle of the night, she says, hey, that car's stolen, go after it. So I'm going after it, and she says, turn the lights and sirens on. So I turn the lights and sirens on, and he's not pulling over, and the speeds are increasing, and it's getting more dangerous, and I'm thinking like somebody should call the police here. And I realized I am the police, and eventually we ended up she's like yelling at me to help get him to stop, and I'm like, I don't think he's gonna stop. I think we need to call somebody here. Like, this is a bad situation. And then eventually she basically told me to ram him, and so I rammed him. We parked into some parked cars. He jumped out, he ran, and a police dog was there who did what they do, and they caught him, and he had a loaded handgun on him, right? And so this was a gang member. He was a Lotus gang member, but he was white. So everything that I knew about gangs in the early 90s came from Boys in the Hood, Colors, straight out of Compton, right? And so this was a white kid in an Asian gang. He lived on the west side of Vancouver, would have gone to McGee, and he's running around a stolen car with a gun, and both parents in the home and all that kind of stuff. So that started this like interest that I had in gang members, and so that that's what drove me to continue my education and eventually do the PhD, and then eventually write my book that I published last year on gangs. But Gang Squad, I mean, it's a fun place. I know Braggs is on the call. I don't know who else is on it, but everybody has their niche, right? And so Braggs was undercover work and homicide. And once you get into a certain area, you try to develop your skill set. And once you're seen as the go-to guy, then you want to continue to do that work. And so I was always fascinated by it. It wasn't like I was asked to apply. I just something I ever wanted to do, and it really was because I think these guys are bullies.
Right. And so, and I've definitely seen you back in the day when I was downtown in restaurants or whatever, and the gang squad comes in and is a very intense looking group of police officers. But so you got a PhD in criminology with a focus on gangs in BC, and I had you or asked you to come and speak to the Vancouver Lawn and Tennis Club for that speaker series I run, and you did this amazing like hour-long talk with photos basically explaining gangs in BC and what the differences are. Can you kind of get into a little bit about that? Of like, you talked about like London and Detroit, I think New York, Vancouver, like just what makes Vancouver unique in our gang world?
Yeah. So in my thesis, I talked about the fellow that I was just talking about who was in the car chase, and the reality for him is that he was a white kid in the Lotus gang, which is predominantly an Asian gang, and he was he came from what we would say would be a non-traditional at-risk home, right? He had both parents, he had lots of opportunities, and as we've talked before, I mean, there's guys over the years who graduated from Vancouver College. They were fighting Irish kids, and they got involved in the gang life, right? So what I did in my thesis was I interviewed former gang members, police officers, and people who worked with gang members. I also did a content analysis of from from 1903 to 2013, every time the word gang appeared in the newspaper. And I also did field observations in London, England, Chicago, Los Angeles, Hobbema, and Toronto. And so that I could say with certainty that what we are dealing with in Vancouver and what we call a gang member is certainly not what you see as a gang member in a place like Chicago or Los Angeles or even London, England, Toronto. It's just different. And since I've continued my research in Detroit, Edmonton, Calgary, and I've got some research plans for as soon as we're able to travel again.
Gotcha. And so I remember one of the stories you said you were I don't know, were you in Detroit and you were with almost kind of like a ride along, and there was a shooting. I don't remember if it was Detroit. You have to correct me, but there was a shooting and nobody was shot, and the cops just were like, "Okay, I guess we're done here," and they left. And you were all like, well, a bit confused about, don't we have to investigate? And they're like, well, there was nobody shot, so we just move on.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really is an interesting phenomenon when we start to compare like countries and stuff. And I think it's, we're probably seeing this a little bit right now with how we analyze data coming out of the United States and how we look at it. So in Chicago, I was there when there was a shooting. We heard the shots with a police officer and myself. We heard the shots. We stopped some people who said, yeah, they were shot at. We went to the scene where they told us they were shot at, and there was bullet casings on the ground. So there had been a shooting. There's no doubt about it. But nobody was shot. And the Chicago police perspective was, if nobody's shot, why are we like, what do you mean? Like, why would we investigate that? And I can tell you in Vancouver, if there's a shooting, even if nobody is actually shot, we've got the full crime scene, the the search and canvas guys out. We've got the trailer. Like, we're going to do a full up job because we treat that as very, very serious gunplay on the streets of Vancouver. But in Chicago, no, it wasn't even unless some damage was done. So like if a round went through a car and smashed the window, well, then they would report that. But if it's just shooting and nobody's hurt, no damage, no foul, no pain, no paperwork, and more importantly, from a criminologist perspective, no actual confirmed data of that from a UCR crime reporting perspective.
Gotcha. It's different. What are the biggest differences of the BC gangs compared to these other cities? How do we differ?
Well, I think the biggest difference right off the bat is that I don't think if you were to bring LAPD gang cops and took them on a tour of Vancouver College, that they would think that any kid graduating from Vancouver College would get involved in gang life, right? Like gang life in places in the United States, Toronto, London, England is really it's a factor of the social conditions in which these kids grow up in. And so 90% of the kids in these communities are joining gangs for a variety of reasons, but attached to the social economic conditions, poverty, marginalization, racism, unemployment, all those factors. Whereas here in British Columbia, I mean, we debate all the time, the people who are sort of, on the front lines of this, like, what is the number? Is it 50% are non-traditional and 50% are traditional? Is it 60? Is it 40? Is it 30? Is it 70? My perspective on it is that it changes, but ultimately, who cares? There's a significant amount of kids that are getting involved in gang lifestyle here by choice, right? They're choosing this life. They're seeking it out. They're not being recruited into the life. They might be being groomed into the life, but ultimately they're making the decision. And that's why we see kids come from, 2-parent homes. I dealt with a family in the last year that I was in gangs where the family's certainly well off. They live in a nice house. Oldest daughter was a UBC grad and was a doctor. The middle was a lawyer. The third was doing pharmacology, and the fourth, the son, was a dial-a-doper on the south shore of southeast sector of Vancouver. So it's hard for me to connect that you can produce 3 children that are stars, and the fourth is a dial-a-dope drug trafficker, right? So it's a choice for a lot of them.
And why do you have thoughts or ideas on why would someone choose that? Is it easy money? It looks attractive. I don't know. They think they're cool. What's the?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors. I mean, one of the things is, and this is where for sure I'm putting my academic criminologist hat on and not necessarily the VPD hat, but um, we've allowed the gangster lifestyle to be glamorized in our city and our province. That's a factor for sure. Like we have not, we haven't had necessarily the same public backlash that other communities have had to the violence. In fact, I personally live in Surrey, and I get very frustrated when I hear things like, "Oh, there was a shooting last night. Oh, that's terrible. Where did it happen? Oh, it was Surrey. Oh, well, Surrey, right?" There's almost this acceptance of it, and Surrey is a great community. It's a wealthy community. It's got great parks, great schools, great teachers, great programs, and so it shouldn't be happening here. So glamorization is a big part. The second thing, which is significant, is that we are geographically in a prime place to participate in international drug trafficking, meaning that we have a large unprotected border with the United States. We have the ability to move drugs into Australia and Japan. We have the ability to move drugs across the country. And in fact, we know for a fact that some people will actually bring drugs into British Columbia from America, move it across Canada, and then back into the United States because they feel there's less risk of being caught at the border than to transport the drugs across the intercontinental U.S. So we have that. We have ports where we search 3% of containers coming into the country. We search 0 containers leaving the country unless there's specific information. So the chances of getting caught here are relatively, they're not significant. And that's before I even begin to talk about the fact that a person convicted of trafficking in British Columbia might face a sentence, like not a first-time offender, like a multiple offender. They might see a sentence of 5, 6. I mean, we just celebrated somebody getting a 9-year sentence for trafficking in fentanyl who was making millions of dollars a year, and we celebrated that. That same person in the United States, in Washington State, would get a 40-year sentence, 40.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So it all comes down to a rational choice. Where do I want to do this? Do I want to bring, we have very small police units on the port. Seattle police have, huge. We have Coast Guard with no guns. They have Coast Guard with guns and basically ocean going frigates, right? Helicopters, planes, all that stuff. So we have that. And then, it's no secret anymore, so I can speak publicly about it. I mean, our casinos are used as laundromats for money, as are luxury homes and cars. So we really did create a bit of the perfect storm. Now, I will say the good news is that, this has been sort of realized, and there are steps being taken by both the provincial and federal government to change that. But yeah.
Gotcha. So maybe can we switching gears a little bit? The COVID-19 situation, lots of people working from home. A couple questions. Like, I guess my first one is, how does work from home work for the police? My assumption is it doesn't, and you guys just keep doing what you do, or does it have things changed a bit, or how does it work?
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, it's been extremely challenging, right? I mean, the analogy that a good friend of mine said is that, I joined the police department and I was prepared. They handed me a gun and a badge and a bulletproof vest, and they said to me, we're giving you this because this job is dangerous and you might have to use this to defend yourself someday. What we didn't join was to have that, but then potentially take the death or risk of death home with us, right?
Right.
So it's been very challenging. It's been very difficult for many people. I had in my squad right now, I have 3 young police officers who have pregnant wives, and so they're not, for the longest period of time, they just weren't going home. They were essentially living away from home. And I kind of say that, you know, VPD was kind of like a boxer that had retired and kind of was out of the fight hadn't been in a fight for a while, and then all of a sudden COVID hit, and it was like we stumbled a little bit, but we got on our feet real fast, and lots of things were put in place to support members, support their mental health, support their families, protocols put in place if somebody was exposed to COVID. So, but the reality is we still got to go to calls, right? And it didn't take very long for people that are our client base to figure out that if they were arrested and they coughed 4 times, they weren't going to jail, right?
Mhm.
And the court shut down and the prosecutor shut down. So subsequently, you know, that presents challenges for us too, because, you know, we were really fortunate one night, just complete lock. My guys were out on foot, and they came across a guy who was acting suspicious. They ended up detaining him, searching him, and he had a gun on him. What we didn't know was a car accident. I would call that it came in as a car accident about 5 blocks away. Was a car accident, but the driver had been shot 4 times by that guy with the gun, right? So, you know, it does present challenges for us, because that person should be in jail, but because of the challenges in jails right now, he was released within, I think, 4 days back into the public on house arrest bail, right? So,
Yeah.
now as far as some of VPD working from home, yeah, there's been people, and the department ramped up very quickly technology and things like this to get people so that they can work from home. But you know, there's challenges. It's not simple, for sure.
Yeah. I can I can definitely see that. So just a quick moment. You guys out there in Zoom land and Facebook land, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat or throw them into comments in Facebook, and we can get Keiron to hopefully answer those. There's some of you are already sending them in through the chat now. But maybe one more question on the COVID before we hit a couple of those hot button topics, and then we can take some questions from the crowd. But how has the work from home situation affected crime and like homelessness, with people not commuting, not going to work, maybe not giving a panhandler money because there was nobody on the streets for a long time? How did that how did that work? What did people do? Did it get worse? Did it get better? How did it
Well,
all?
it's interesting. It's interesting. It really is, and I think it's too early to actually. I certainly can't answer this yet, but I suspect someone like the chief constable could. But I mean, I can tell you that residential break-and enters went down, but residential break-and enters went down. Commercial break-and enters went up.
Yeah. We
District
saw a lot of the
1,
boards going up.
yeah. So District 1 call load went down initially. District 3, where I work, call load went up. Domestic disputes went up. Suicide calls went up. So for a period of time, I mean, I was kind of joking, because we were literally getting suicide, domestic, suicide, domestic. Like, that was our day. And so it really depended where you worked a little bit. And I think that I definitely, there was, it certainly was a very hard time and still is, for a lot of people. The other thing too is that, you know, we had to be very careful about what kinds of calls that we attended. So in the early days, you know, we were sort of attending priority 1 and priority 2s, and everything else was being taken over the phone. But the reality is, you know, you got to go. If it's a domestic dispute, you got to go in the house.
Yeah.
And if people in the house have COVID, you're going to be exposed. And so we had to go into some protocols about, you know, what happens to the police car, and what happens to the members, and what happens to their uniforms. And, you know, we were lucky that a movie company gave us some access to some portable dressing rooms, so that members could go and take their clothes off and put them in a bag and have other clothes and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, early days, it was quite challenging. We didn't, we struggled like everybody else to have masks and hand sanitizer and all that stuff. I mean, we were really lucky in VPD because our management got on that issue right away, and we were, I think we were never out, but we were lean for the first little bit, and now we've got tons of supplies.
That's good. So keeping track of time here, there's a bunch of questions coming in, but I've got kind of 4, I don't know, I put them on my thing here as hot button topics that they might be super quick answers for you.
Yeah.
Because
no comment. No comment.
So I'm going to hit you with them anyways. So Vancouver Park Board last night voted that people can live in the parks, I think, until 7 or 8 in the morning, and then they've got to go. Does that help the situation at these different parks where they've already got some tents going on? Does that hurt it? Is it, I don't know, is it good or bad? It's definitely different, but what do you have an opinion on that one?
Well, I have an opinion, but I'm probably not going to express
live
it
on the internet.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see where this goes. I did think today about purchasing a tent and moving to West Point Grey Road because I thought that would be a very nice view for me for the summer. But the whole getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning thing every day, see how that works out.
Gotcha. So next topic, equally as challenging. How's the, like, I don't know if you can answer for the VPD, but Black Lives Matter, it's a, hot topic around the world now. Like how has VPD dealt with it? Has it become a problem in Vancouver with how the relationship works with the community? Is that what?
Yeah. So I mean, first and foremost, I mean, I can't answer for VPD. I can answer. I can put my university professor hat on it, and it's definitely a subject that I've been studying for a while with my students, and we look at the role of police from guardians to caretakers, right? And militarization of policing is obviously something that a lot of people are looking at, and that kind of stuff. And I think that it is frustrating as a Canadian police officer, and this is no slight to my friends who are American police officers who I have a lot of respect for, okay? But it is a much different environment to police in Canada than it is in the United States. And it's a much different environment to police in Vancouver than it is to police in other parts of Canada. So I think that at the end of the day, the events that occurred in Minneapolis, I don't think there's anybody there. I haven't heard a single police officer who tries to defend or support the actions of the officers that were there, who I think the court will find committed murder. And I think that I don't think there's anybody who's going to defend that. And I can tell you that in 31 years of policing, I've never had my knee on the back of somebody's neck. We are actually trained. Not only are we trained not to do it, we're trained that it's prohibited to do, right? So that's not to suggest that, hey, in a fight things happen and it might, your knee might slide for a momentary second to somebody's neck, but as soon as it's conscious that it's there, you're gonna readjust yourself to ensure that doesn't happen. So the part that I find, and I'm gonna go a little out of the limb here, is that I think that could have been the tipping point moment for policing in North America, and particularly in the United States. But I think the response that has occurred in some cities has resulted in some ability to discredit certain perspectives, right? Because what we're seeing is violence in some of the communities that need the police the most. A lot of them ethnic communities. The violence has not stopped. The violence has not decreased. And I have a friend with the Chicago Police Department that responded to a shooting of a 5-year-old last week, and the 5-year-old died. And that is at the same time that people are protesting and asking for defunding the police, and the police are responding to multiple shootings in Chicago, and they can't keep up. I just saw that the community in New York City has asked the NYPD to bring back their anti-crime plainclothes officers because shootings have gone through the roof, right? So it's first and foremost, I want to say it's a much different issue in Canada than it is in the United States. But that's not to say that we don't have some work to be done. We do. But I think that if you look at when I was with the Jefferson Parish officers just outside of New Orleans, and the highest paid officer in that group was making $23 an hour, and you look at what a Vancouver police officer is earning with almost 100% have at least an undergraduate degree, if not a master's degree, if not having been to law school, some PhDs. I mean, there is a different perspective for sure. That's not to say that we don't have work to do. For sure, there's work to be done, but it is disheartening to compare some of the events that occur in the United States and say that just completely translates to our experience, because I don't think it does.
Gotcha. Well, it's just a massive topic. So you mentioned defund the police. Mark's asked that here in the chat. It was one of my sort of last sort of things of, maybe can you comment on that, of like, one, what does that mean? Defund the police. It sounds pretty drastic.
Was that from Mark Reed, that question?
Yeah.
So it'd be kind of like his shirt that he's currently wearing, right? It's like, so you have a normal shirt that's full, but you're going to make it smaller so it doesn't really quite fit, and then you try to continue to operate the same way, right? No, I mean, all kidding aside, defund the police. I can't speak for other organizations. I can tell you what the reality is for policing Vancouver, and we do really well for priority 1 calls, right? So your house getting broken into and you're on the phone and you're screaming you need the police, like, we're doing really well at those calls. Like, we're hitting best police practices all the time. And priority 2s, we're still pretty good. But it's not uncommon for you to wait a week for the police to show up to your house to report your house was broken into. And so they want to talk about defunding the police, and I go, okay, well, what's the real consequence of that, right? Now, with that said, I would say that in my 31 years, there is a significant amount of police calls where, when I first started, we were the agency of last resort, whereas we are now the agency of first resort. So, a lot of calls that sit on the board that they need us to go to, they're not police calls, right? They are, many people don't know this, but there's many people in the community that get injections for mental health, right? And if they don't show up for their injection, the hospitals call the police, and they issue what's called a Form 21 warrant. So why do the police need to be involved in that, right? It really doesn't need to be like that. So I think there's nothing wrong with us as a society and as a community looking at what task can we take off of the police, and maybe fund other agencies better. But I could tell you, most social workers are not going to go into a house to apprehend children without the police present.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. He's a police officer, and I asked him a similar question. He said that was the example he used. He said, yeah, lots of it should be done by social workers, or that we shouldn't be there for whatever the issue is that's trying to be solved. And he's like, but at the end of the day, many of those, if it is a social worker, something, just they don't feel comfortable going in without the police. So it ends up having to have the police there as well.
Well, there's many calls. I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand this. There's many calls where the ambulance will not go in without us. The fire department won't go in without us. I mean, I laugh often because, we have a good relationship with the Vancouver Fire Department, but there'll be like 4 totally in shape guys with axes and crowbars, and they're standing there, but they won't go in until I show up. And I'm like, okay, let's go, boys. Right. So, that's just the way it is. Right. And I'm not sure. I would like to be frank with you, I didn't join the job. I didn't join to be a police officer. I didn't join to apprehend mentally ill people and take them to the hospital and sit in the hospital for 5, 6, 8, 10 hours. I didn't. That's not what I joined, and most police officers didn't either, right? I didn't join to apprehend children from homes. I joined to chase bad guys, right? And so most police officers, when you say this, they're like, yeah, bring it, absolutely. We'd love for you to do this. Like, if you want to send social workers in the middle of the night to some guy who's screaming out the window, and the social worker gets there and the guy's naked, or he's defecated all over himself and rubbed it all over his body, and he's standing there with a samurai sword, we're okay to give that up. We'll franchise that work out. We're fine with that. But the reality is, I think most of us know that that's not safe for anybody. And the police have a duty to protect everybody, and that includes the social workers and the psychologists and the doctors and the psych nurses that are gonna go to these calls. And I found it interesting. Just this week, BC Ambulance put out a letter about defunding the police, saying, you really need to look at this, because other services will be detrimentally affected if there are not police officers to attend.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I think the term defund the police, it just sounds so like massive and final, but I don't think that's actually what people mean. It's just I don't know, it's the term people use.
I think there are
the
people
allocation.
there are people that do mean it, though, right? There are. I mean, they are people that are abolitionists of the police and they want to have a society without police. And then there are people that are like, well, no, I don't really want to defund the police. What I want to do is fund other agencies. But, I would be very pleased 5 years from now to say, for us to play this video and I'd be wrong. And it worked out. Like, it worked out. Like, there's police agencies in the States right now that are starting this. No more homeless, no more disturbance calls with homeless people. No more mental health checks. No more this, no more that. There's one that's even gone as far as to say that police aren't going to do traffic stops and issue traffic tickets. So.
Wow. All right. So we're running out of time. I've got a bunch of questions that have come in. Prabjeet and Denise asked basically related questions, but I'll start with Prab. He says, what clues or signs should you look for in your kids to basically make sure that they're not falling into that gang scene, or it's been being considered cool? What do you look for, and how do you counter those ideas if you see that?
Okay, so I could go on for I do like a 2-hour parent session on this, so I'm not going to do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you that if you punch into your internet search engine CFSEU and gang life, there are incredible resources on there that address exactly that question.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the flip side of it was Denise's question is, well, what advice would you give to a child who wants to become a police officer? So the other end of the spectrum.
Don't do it.
Is that serious?
Pretty serious. Yep. Yeah.
Why?
So you're going to get me all emotional now. And I could see Bragg sitting there. It's not the job it was. And it is until society truly understands the commitment that these people have for their community, I'm not sure I'd want my children to go into this field anymore. I just wouldn't. I don't think there's many police officers who are going to be encouraging their kids to go into this work anymore, because I think that VPD has a very high public approval rating, and it's even higher for people who've actually dealt with us in the last year, and I'm talking in the 70s and 80s. And we always talk about the silent majority, and the silent majority doesn't, they don't talk about us, they don't support us, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is that we need your support now. Like we've never needed it before. Recruiting's down 500%. Wow. Now you think about that. A guy who goes and gets an undergrad degree and he joins the police department, and within 4 years, he's making $104,000 a year. That's good money. And he's got $1 million pension waiting for him after 30-year service. And he's got his medical and dental and all those kinds of things. And recruiting's down 500%, right? So I think at this stage in our history, I would say the fire department's a great option. And I think that there's other things that you can do with your life. Now, I don't want to leave people thinking, oh, he's just the old bitter twisted guy, because I'm not. I've loved my job and I still love it. I still love it. But I'm glad I'm near the end, right? I'm glad I'm near the end. If I haven't successfully talked you out of it, I would say keep your nose clean, pick your friends, be really careful what you put up on social media. Alcohol, drug, gambling, these are all issues that concern us. Volunteer with kids, coach, be engaged in sports, and graduate and get a degree, and treat people kindly. Because what's going to happen is when you go for your application, they're going to interview anywhere between 30 to 60 people that know you, and you're going to have to take a polygraph.
Wow. So I've got maybe 2 or maybe 3 more questions here. Aiden just asked, maybe we'll keep it on this topic, what needs to change for you to change your opinion on the future of policing as a career?
I think the silent majority has to stop being silent. I think people have to start to openly support the police. Like, I'm not saying we have to have a Pollyanna perspective towards the police. The police make errors all the time, and we're held to account for those errors, and we're held to task for those errors. You know, if you actually saw the level of accountability and scrutiny that police officers are under for things, I mean, I think most people would be surprised. I think most people would be actually surprised at how much actual effort is put into investigating police officers that are suspected of low levels of misconduct all the way up to serious levels of misconduct. So you have very credible police in our community, but I really do think that it's time for the public to express that and tell people, and
How do you suggest that? Aiden's basically running this part of the interview. He's like, how does the silent majority support you in this? Like,
well, I got to be I'll
on
tell you
Facebook,
what,
or like write letters to the
well,
VPD or to the
well,
your
I don't know. I
MP?
mean, I think one of the things that really has an impact is when, something that is really, people probably think is not a big deal, but when you walk up to a police officer who's standing there in July weather wearing Kevlar and you say, hey, thank you for your service, it means a ton. It really does. It means a ton. Like, you see these tough street cops that get little tears in their eyes over it, because that's something. The second thing is, and we're seeing it for sure locally, there are politicians that are quite prepared to get political currency by making statements around defunding the police or being critical of the police and those kinds of things. And how do we deal with that? At election time, right? At election time, and we vote for people. I'm not saying, I want to be clear, because this is it's very easy for people to fall into this. Well, he's just saying, well, everything the police do is roses and lovely. That's not what I'm saying at all, right? But we have to start having a more charitable interpretation of what the police do. We need to understand the circumstances where they are. I mean, let's think about this for a second. How many of you out there would want to walk the beat in the downtown east side right now with COVID? How many of you would like to walk into a single room occupancy in the downtown east side right now with COVID? And then go back to the office at the end of the day, change out of your uniform, get in your personal car that you share with your wife and your kids, drive home, and go into your family home. And our guys do it every day. Show up. In fact, the VPD has been trying to give people more time off as COVID mental health days, and guys are refusing to take them because they're that committed. So I think that's it. I think politicians should be held account. We definitely are seeing some statements being made out of the city council around budgets, police budgets, and I think that's where people can express their perspective.
Gotcha. So we got 5 minutes left. I've got two final questions for you. This Surrey police force, what are your thoughts? Is it good, bad? RCMP, does it matter to your average citizen? Is it?
Yeah, so I'll just tell you right off front that I have a bias here for sure, but I think that the bottom line is, and I'm going to take the political correct answer out. The citizens of Surrey voted, and they voted for a mayor who had three promises. One of them was the replacement of the RCMP with a municipal police force. The provincial government doesn't have the ability, despite what people think, they don't have the ability to stop that. Okay, the contract says clearly if the municipality wants to get out and they give their 2-year notice, they can get out. So that's what's occurring. They're getting out. What I can tell people is that, you know, the people on the initial transition report, people that are in, you know, a vast amount of experience in police finance and budgets, academics, they presented a report and said this can be done. And the province said, okay, fair enough. We're going to bring in some more experts, including 4 people that could be seen to have aligned with the RCMP. And when they finished their position, it went to the Minister of Police Services, and the permission was granted. So I think at the end of the day, the mayor had a clear mandate to do this. There's been enough people involved in the process that are experts in the field who say this can be done, and I suspect that in the next little bit it will be done. I mean, they've announced a police board. At this point, I think there's simply too much toothpaste out of the tube, right?
Right.
And this is not, yeah. And I think I'll leave it there.
Can I pull on it just slightly with a bit of a different question first? Like, I don't know what's the difference? Like, the RCMP, are they better at rural? Is that the conversation, or is there just because they're nationwide? Like, I don't. Or is it still we can't talk about it?
No, I don't think it's real. I think what we have to look at is I get the question, right? It's not really about they're better at this than that, right? That's not what it was like, because the Surrey RCMP, the frontline members of the Surrey RCMP do a fantastic job every single day, and I'm not just saying that. Like, they really do a good job. Anytime I've called the Surrey RCMP, they've been fantastic, right? They've been really, really good. This is about, so I know there's a few people out there that are business people. So let me put it to you like this, okay? So you own a restaurant, a franchise restaurant, across from a high school, okay? And you sell poutine. And your number one seller is poutine at lunchtime for those kids. They're coming over there, they're killing the poutine, right? But the franchise owner in Ottawa says, you know what? This poutine, we're not really selling poutine anywhere else in Canada. We're going to get rid of poutine, right? So you tell the guy out there tell you can't have poutine anymore. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, this, I sell a lot of poutine. What are you talking about? This is a big part of my sales. The RCMP is a franchise. That's what it is. It's a very effective franchise. It does a great job, but the citizens of Surrey voted and said, we want to have a local police department with local accountability. And, I think that's really what it comes down to. It's the ability to set local priorities. And then the other thing that I'm just going to throw this out, and maybe I'm going to go off the ledge a little bit, but, one of the parts I struggle with is, I've said to people, what would be so wrong with the kid who grows up in Surrey, goes to high school in Surrey, plays sports in Surrey, plays for the Surrey Rebels lacrosse teams, the Cloverdale Colts hockey, goes to volunteers in Surrey, graduates from Simon Fraser University in Surrey or Kwantlen Polytechnic University in Surrey, and joins the Surrey PD and serves in Surrey for 30 years. What's so wrong with that? As opposed to taking somebody from Flin Flon, Manitoba, Halifax, Montreal, and bringing them here and having to learn, right? So I really I really struggle when we get into this discussion about RCMP versus, that's not what it's about. It's about local accountability, and it's about the democratic process which occurred. And I mean, this was not a mayor who had 15 election promises. There was 3.
Yeah.
So.
No, I gotcha. So my final question: where do you go from here? What's next in your, I don't know, policing career? You said you could technically retire
Well,
anytime you want.
right after this, I'm going to the store and I'm going to buy Mark Reed a shirt, like a full shirt.
Seems like a reasonable thing to do.
Right? Maybe a razor. Maybe a razor.
Shirt.
Got my dentist appointment. I don't know. Right? So this is actually quite fun because they can't talk. This is awesome.
That's a very strategic decision. I've muted everybody. They can type it in.
I don't know. You know what? I don't know. I have some teaching opportunities that are really nice offers to leave policing. I'm still a young guy. I'm only 51. So even though I can retire, I still have fun, and I'll be in a patrol car tomorrow night, and I still enjoy it. The young guys their energy is infectious, and lots of laughs and all that kind of stuff. So I really don't know.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much for doing this. The comments that I'm getting in both sides and both chats here have been very positive. Aiden's already asking if you'd do another hour another time.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's been really good. Thank you very much for doing this. For all of you that have shown up for this, thank you for attending. The people in Zoom, they pay $10 to get a ticket to be here. The $10 goes 100%. We're buying gift certificates from Vancouver College alumni-owned restaurants. The Vancouver College Alumni Association then sits on those gift certificates, and we'll use them as prizes next year when we have a golf tournament or any of our events. But the idea is to put some cash right now in the hands of VC alumni-owned restaurants. So for the guys that are on Facebook, we just started streaming this the last 2. You kind of got a free ride. If you want to buy a ticket for the next one, always helpful. The alumni restaurants that we're supporting have been very appreciative of this. Like I said, July 22nd, we've got Kevin Falcon. He's Executive Vice President of Anthem, and used to be the Minister of Finance of the BC government. And then July 29th, we've got Prabjit and Ricky Ball from Lotus Terminals talking about trucking and logistics. And if you have time and want to do it, buy a brick for the alumni quarter. It's $2,500. They're a few away from the goal of 400. Go to VCalumni.com. Again, thank you, Keiron. Thanks everybody for joining, and have a good night.
Good night.